Hi everybody, my name is Warren and welcome back to Work with Warren, a place where we are creating a beautiful life on a budget through thrift, hustle, and DIY. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so I will keep this intro short. Our living room needs lighting, and lighting that makes a statement is expensive. So I am going to thrift and DIY my way to some cozy vibes. And I recently watched a woodworking video where the person did 3 different cutting boards, one in 5 minutes, one in 5 hours, and one in 5 days. And this video is like an unofficial version of that because while the first project maybe took me about 10 minutes of work and a couple hours of paint drying, the other 2 were about 5 hours and about 5 days. So welcome to the unofficial and untimed 5-minute, 5-hour, and 5-day lighting challenge, which starts now. The inspiration behind this project was that I saw a double shaded lamp on Instagram and I loved the look. I wanted to recreate it. So I found this lamp for $20 on Facebook Marketplace. I'm just giving it a clean here and then gonna give it a scuff sand just to make sure that the spray paint will stick. And I found within a few days at the thrift store, so oftentimes things don't line up so well, but I found these 2 lampshades. One's a little bit smaller than the other and they were $1 each. I don't know if they're mispriced or what, but I thought it was such a good deal. So I cleaned it, I scuff sanded it, and then I'm wrapping this black part here in some painter's tape because I don't need that to get painted. And then I took some trusty black spray paint in a satin finish and I sprayed this down. I think I got it all in one coat actually. The 2 parts of the smaller shade had become disconnected, so I used some spray adhesive and I put them back together. I think that these shades are the type that sit directly on the bulb, so I had to remove this little ring that was holding the 2 metal clip parts together because I needed them to sit on the actual lamp itself and not on the bulb. So I did that for both of the shades, then I removed the painter's tape and I played a sort of game of operation where I tried not to scuff up the spray paint that I had just done. I put the larger shade on first and kind of maneuvered that down the lamp while I put the smaller shade on second and then moved the larger shade back to sit on top of that. And to make sure that the larger shade was sitting exactly where I wanted it, I used zip ties to secure that to the actual lamp so that it wasn't sitting too low against the smaller shade. And with that, this project is done. It only took a couple of hours, and most of that was just letting paint and adhesive dry. I picked up this floor vase for $50 from the thrift store, what a score, and then about a year later I found this lampshade, which was going to be the right scale for the lamp that I wanted to make. So, and then they sat in my garage for about another 6 months while I figured out exactly what I wanted to do. Kind of had a rough idea, but wasn't exactly sure. So when I was ready to go, I cleaned it, and then I marked out a line where I wanted to put some of the stuff I was going to add on with some painter's tape. But I realized that the painter's tape was pulling off the paint or whatever finishing it is, and as you can see, it's coming off very easily. So I thought that whatever I was going to add on to it would be likely to either pull the paint off or chip or something, and I didn't want that, so I sanded everything down to the material beneath. I'm guessing it's like some sort of clay or something. Where this roll of recycled paper or whatever this is came from, I have no idea, but I certainly didn't pay for it and I am certainly going to use it. So I am going to make a makeshift paper mache to add to the lamp. And the first step in this is to soak the paper so that I can mix it with the other ingredients. And so I'm tearing this paper into strips and I'm soaking it in this warm water. And while that soaks, I'm cleaning down what will be the body of the lamp with a damp rag to make sure that all the dust has been removed, and then I'm going to use some painter's tape to tape out the lines where I'm going to be adding the paper mache. After the paper had soaked for a couple of hours, I drained out most of the liquid and took my paint mixer attachment and my drill, and I broke down the paper into much smaller chunks. When the chunks were about the size that I liked, I dropped them into a drop cloth, squeezed out more liquid, and then returned them to this tub. Now it's time for paper mache. I have no idea what the proportions are supposed to be. I am by no means a paper mache expert, but I'm just eyeballing this. So I'm using 2 bottles of Elmer's glue, just the regular kind that you use for school projects. And I had this joint compound sitting in my garage for well over a year. I have no idea what I originally purchased it for, but this seemed like the right project for it. So I mixed that together with my paint mixer, and I kept on adding joint compound until the consistency seemed appropriate. When I was happy with that mix, it's time to apply it to the vase. I am just replacing the painter's tape with a line of paper mache, and because the vase is tapered and I don't love that look, I am actually adding a thicker layer as I go lower so that it visually counteracts the taper. Now, as you can see, I'm wearing gloves. I found that I was not able to be as accurate as I wanted to be, so you can see now that I took them off. If you know a good pair of chemical-resistant, well-fitting gloves that still allows you to be precise with your hands, please leave that in the comments below, because I want to protect my hands, but I also want it to turn out the way that I want it to turn out. So if you know, let me know. Share the knowledge. Thank you. This needs to dry for a couple of days, so while I'm letting it do that, I'm going to the thrift store to try and find the actual parts to make this a lamp. But then this happens. Just shoot me. I am working on this here. I go to the thrift store to find an old lamp with like a harp that I can hang the shade on. Do I find that? No, I don't find anything that's new enough that I'd feel comfortable reusing. I do, however, find completely non-lamp things that I could use as a lamp. I mean, maybe part of it was from a lamp before, but anyway, this is now what I'm working with. I found these 2 matching decorative bowls for $6 each, and these globes which look like they match, but they don't, but they are so close that you would never be able to tell. And then I picked up these for $3 each as well. So I'm going to make some like desktop, tabletop lamps out of them. Now my plan is to use this drill attachment to drill out a hole to put the actual lamp pieces in. These are obviously some sort of ceramic or something, and this is an attachment for wood, so I'm not expecting this to go very well. I needed to have like some sort of grip here, so I put some painter's tape in the bottom of the bowl and a little bit of water to do kind of like a wet grind. Wow, I just heard that as well. Anyway, the first one didn't work out, but the second one was actually perfect, which I'm not even gonna bother showing you because it's just drilling for like 10 minutes. So for the first one that I did where it kind of broke out of the bottom, I'm taking some chicken coop wire. Again, I have no idea why I have this. I did buy this for, maybe I want to make a sculpture or something. Anyway, now it's being used to hold the lamp piece in the bottom of this bowl. Once I've cleaned and dried the bowls, I'm just giving them a scuff sand with this little sanding block here to make sure that the paint will adhere properly. I wipe down the dust from the bowls, and then it's time to paint. And for these bowls, I'm using a light coat of the same satin black that I used in the first project, but after the first coat, I could tell that they were a little too shiny for what I wanted, so I took some black acrylic paint and I just painted over them again. Yeah, much better. See, and I love that it kind of added this texture to it. And now it is time to actually paint on the design. And I realized that I had a Lazy Susan, also a thrift find, and I'm just gonna add some white paint, not really going off of anything in particular here. I just wanted a nice black and white pattern on this. And for the second bowl, I used the similar style, but just did a different design. And I'm sealing these with a matte Mod Podge, which I've never used as a sealer before, but I've seen other people doing it, and it worked fairly well. Like I have no complaints. It didn't spread the paint or anything like that. Everything was fine with that. However, it did leave a bit of a sheen. It was more of like a satin finish than matte in my opinion, but it wasn't bad enough that I wanted to redo them, so I just left it as is. And once those dried, I added these little rubber feet to the bottom so that the cord had somewhere to go out of the bottom without making the lamps wobbly. And finally, to actually make these lamps, I'm threading the cord through the holes that I drilled, and for the one that got kind of over drilled and broken there, I am securing the chicken wire into place using my trusty old hot glue gun. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I present, well, lamps. What did you expect? So I got this lampshade from the thrift store for $10. I mean, I only paid $8 because I have tons of 20% off coupons because I donate all the time because I'm such a good person. And as you can see, it had this watermark at the bottom and it was super textured fabric, which I really liked that part of it, but I didn't like the watermark. So either I had to rewrap it, which was going to be hard because of the textured fabric, or I opted for painting, obviously, as you can see. The inside, I used just a white acrylic paint, and then I had these sample like wall paints from like way back when, and I had one in a really light beige, and I added some of the white acrylic paint to that, and I just like stippled and maybe that's not the right word, but I like attacked the shade to get into all the grooves from all the texture, and I brushed it on, and in the end it looked like this. Now, to smooth out the texture of the paper mache, I used a throwaway paintbrush and some of the joint compound, and I brushed that over all of the lines that I had put in with the paper mache there, just to kind of smooth it out a little bit so it wasn't quite as rough and bumpy. After the first coat, I gave it a light sanding, and then I went back in with another coat to really kind of get into any of the grooves and the bumps, just to make sure that it was as smooth as possible. Again, I am trying to save my hands here by applying with the plastic bag, but it just wasn't going on the way that I wanted, so I went in with my bare hands, and yeah, they were a little dry for a few days. So if you got the deets about those gloves that work for this kind of situation, please let me know in the comments below. And once the second coat of joint compound was dry, I gave it another light sand to get it ready to paint. And at this point, I'm loving the way it's looking. It still has some texture, but overall it's fairly smooth and looks like it could kind of have been made this way. And I just used some, like, the bottom of the barrel leftover primer that I had from some of my old projects there, and I put that all over the entire body of the vase. For the base of this, I'm just using this black acrylic paint. Any of the paint that I had left over was more of like a satin finish, so I ended up grabbing a few bottles of this from the dollar store, and I've been wanting to do this, I know I'm late to the game, the baking soda hack, which just gives it even more texture. So I added some baking soda to the paint, mixed it in, and then I started spreading this all over the areas that I'd primed. Because the baking soda had thickened the paint up, it left these brush marks in the finish, and I didn't like that. So I went back with a sponge on my second coat and made sure that I was kind of dabbing it so it looked more like it was a rough finish as opposed to a painted on finish. I am sure that you're wondering what's in this bag because you're so nosy. It's dirt, and we'll get back to that in a second. I'm going to go for this like faux aged finish. I've seen Jorge from Casa Refine do this a number of times, so I'm mixing some white and earthy tone paints with some water and then applying it to the vase. The first stroke that I did here, I thought that I'd fucked up. It was way too contrasty, so I decided to add some more water to the mixture and just trust the process and go for it. I figured out fairly quickly that if you do your brush strokes upwards, it works better because it just allows everything to flow naturally downwards. So I did that. I went around the whole thing a couple of times with the white paint, and then I added in some black paint to the mixture to go in with another layer that was going to give it some depth. At this point, I am feeling way better about this now that the darker colors are mixing in. It's much more the vibe that I'm going for. And then I decided to add some dirt in because I've seen people do this as well to give it that natural, authentic aged feel. But I think where I went wrong was the fact that I was brushing this on in the same way as opposed to like rubbing it over top. This is what the lamp is looking like right now. I do like the effect. I think that the dirt is a little too like prominent and runny, so I'm going to try a few other things here. I mean, I think I could probably just wipe that down a little bit, which is fine, but I would like a little bit more depth on the colors instead of it just being this white and dirt color here, so I'm going to try a few more things. Going in with a damp rag is exactly what I did, and it worked perfectly. It kind of just blended the dirt in so that it wasn't streaky anymore and just spread it around. And then I went in with a few more layers. I alternated between darker and lighter tones just to give it that depth, and it worked out. Like, the more layers that you do, the better it looks, and by the end I was very happy with it. I did try the dirt mixture one more time. This time I just spread it with my hands along the bottom where people would be naturally grabbing this to move it over the years. After many failed attempts to thrift a lamp with a long enough cord and new enough parts that I'd feel comfortable using it, I just decided to purchase a lamp kit from Amazon, which ended up being the great choice. It was super easy to use. I will link it below if you have any lamp projects coming up in your future. I needed to chop the top of this vase off because otherwise the shade was going to sit way too high. So I marked out where I needed to cut, and I made the cut with a Sawzall and a blade that I was willing to throw away. So I lightly scored where I wanted the cut to be, and then after about 20 minutes of slowly cutting deeper, the top came off, and then I sanded that down with an 80 grit sandpaper to make sure that everything was even. Now, something that happened that I wasn't expecting was that there was a lot of dust from this. I mean, I know I should have expected it, but this actually ended up working out really well because it kind of blended all the paint at the top and it made it look even more authentically aged. Here you can see me tracing out the circumference of the top of the vase on a piece of cardboard. I'm going to cut this out with some scissors and use this as a template, which I'm going to trace out onto some MDF and cut out with a jigsaw. This is the piece that is going to sit on top of the lamp where the lamp kit is going to attach to. When I'm making a cut like this, I always cut just a little bit outside of the lines, and then I'm using a sander to sand down to the line that I traced. And I grabbed these diamond tip drill bits from Amazon for about $15 for a pack of 8. Not gonna lie, I only got this one use out of it, but considering that they sell for like $50 to $80 per bit at the big box stores, I am not gonna complain. It got the job done. After feeding the cord through the hole that I just drilled, I somehow needed to get it to the top of the lamp, and I wasn't quite sure how to do that, so you get to watch me struggle and dance with this vase while trying not to drop it, and I didn't. I did a great job of not dropping it, and I did get the cord out the top, so now we were ready to party. The lamp kit needed somewhere to sit, so I drilled a hole through the center of the MDF piece that you just saw me cut out, and then I threaded the base piece of the lamp kit into that so that everything else could screw onto that piece. And once that was all in place, I fed the cord through that part of the lamp kit, and I used some hot glue to attach the MDF to the top of the vase. And to cover up that seam, I used some air dry clay, which wasn't applying the way that I wanted it to, so I scraped away what I could with a screwdriver, and then I applied some, you guessed it, joint compound. And the last thing to do for the actual lamp components was to connect the wiring, which was also easy to do. You just wrapped it around the screws as marked and tightened the screws so that the wires were held in place. And all that's left after all of that work is some finishing touches. I did some final drips to make sure that everything was blended in and looked seamless. Alright guys, before we finish up this video with the final reveal, I just wanted to thank you so much for sticking around. If you like this video, or at least appreciate how much work went into it, please leave me a like below. It is the best way to support this channel. And if you want to leave me a comment telling me which one of these 3 projects was your favorite, do that in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And without any further ado, here is the floor lamp.